Some stories stay with you forever. Here's one of them. Don't forget to like and subscribe. She was just a simple cleaner, but when she saw two babies crying every night, she uncovered a dark secret their millionaire father was hiding. What she did next changed everything forever. I pay you $3,000 a month and you can't even get two babies to stop crying, Mark Sterling shouted at the 12th nanny who had quit in 3 months. What kind of professionals are you? Fernanda, a 40-year-old woman with 20 years of experience, was arranging her things, her hands trembling. Mr. Sterling, I've never seen anything like it. These babies won't stop crying for even 5 minutes. It's like they're possessed. Possessed? Mark laughed bitterly. They're 8 months old. They're babies. Normal? Fernanda turned to face him. Normal babies don't cry for 8 hours straight every night. Normal babies don't stare at the ceiling as if they're seeing something that isn't there. And normal babies have parents who hold them. The last phrase cut Mark like a knife. His face flushed with anger. How dare you question how I raise my children? I work 16 hours a day to give them everything they need. Everything but affection, Fernanda muttered, picking up her bag. What did you say? Nothing, sir. I just hope you find someone who can help these children because they are suffering. The door slammed shut, leaving Mark alone in the mansion's foyer. From upstairs came the familiar screams of the twins, Peter and Paul, who at 8 months old seemed to have declared war on silence. It was 2 p.m. on a Thursday, and they had already been crying for 4 uninterrupted hours. Mark climbed the stairs with heavy steps, stopping at the door of the baby's room. Through the crack, he could see the 2 solid wood cribs shaking with his children's desperation. Peter was red from crying, his fists clenched, his whole body tense. Paul was doing the same, as if they were synchronized in their agony. "Carmen!" he shouted, and the housekeeper came running. "Yes, sir. I need another nanny today. Call every agency you know." Carmen lowered her eyes. "Sir, I already tried yesterday after Fernanda gave notice. No agency wants to send anyone here." "What do you mean, they don't want to?" "They say their nannies always come back traumatized. One agency even said they're putting us on their problem client list." Mark felt the world crashing down. In 8 months, he had tried everything. Nannies with diplomas, specialized nurses, even a woman who claimed to be an expert in difficult babies. All of them had fled as if the house were on fire. "So, what do I do now?" "There's a young woman at the door who wants to talk to you about a job," Carmen said hesitantly. "A nanny?" "No, sir. A housekeeper. But she said she has experience with children." Mark looked at Carmen as if she had gone crazy. "Carmen, the house is already clean. I need someone to make these babies stop crying." "I know, but she insisted very much, and the way things are..." The screams from upstairs grew louder, as if the babies knew they were being discussed. Mark ran his hands through his hair, feeling like he was going to lose his mind. "Fine. Send her in, but I'm not promising anything." Helena Silva entered the room as if she were afraid of nothing. 28 years old, with blonde hair pulled back in a ponytail, a simple white blouse, and faded jeans. She didn't seem intimidated by the luxurious mansion or by the screams echoing through the house. "Good afternoon, Mr. Sterling," she said, extending her hand. "My name is Helena Silva." "Helena, I'll be direct. I don't need a housekeeper. I need someone to make my children stop crying. I heard them from outside. It must be very difficult for everyone." "Difficult?" Mark almost shouted. "I haven't slept properly in 8 months. I've lost important contracts because I show up to meetings, looking like a zombie. 12 nannies have quit." Helena kept her voice calm. "And what did the doctors say?" "That there's nothing wrong with them. Normal exams, perfect health, but they cry as if they're being tortured. Can I go up and see them?" "What for? You're not a nanny." "No, but I've taken care of a baby who cried a lot," Helena replied. Mark looked at her with suspicion. "When I raised my younger brother by myself when I was 18 years old. My parents died. And he was 2 months old. He cried just like this. Worse, there was something in Helena's voice that made Mark stop questioning. Fine, but just to look. They went up together, the sound of crying becoming deafening. The twins' room was a shocking contrast. Very expensive furniture, imported toys, everything perfect. And in the midst of all that luxury, 2 small babies were crying as if the world were ending. Helena approached the cribs slowly. Peter's face was wet with tears, his little arms stretched upwards. Paul was writhing, as if something was hurting him. How long have they been like this today? Since 10 in the morning. And yesterday from 9 at night to 6 in the morning. Helena watched the babies in silence. She didn't try to pick them up, didn't make soft noises, didn't try to distract them with toys. She just watched. Mr. Sterling, she said after a few minutes, can I ask you a question? Go ahead. How often do you hold your children? The question was like a slap in the face. Mark felt anger explode in his chest. Listen here, Helena. Whoever you are, I don't need lessons on how to be a father. I need someone to solve this problem. I'm not giving a lesson, she said without getting flustered. I'm just trying to understand. Understand why they're crying. I already told you the doctors found nothing. I believe you, but the problem isn't always physical. Mark stopped shouting. What do you mean? Babies feel everything, sir. They feel anger, sadness, loneliness. Even without understanding, they absorb the emotions of adults. That's crazy talk. Maybe. But my brother stopped crying when I learned to stay calm around him. The twins continued to cry, as if nothing in the world could console them. Mark looked at his children, and for the first time in months, truly saw them. 2 small, defenseless babies who were perhaps asking for something he didn't know how to give. What do you want in exchange for trying to help? I'll work as a housekeeper. $2,000 a month. 2,000. That's less than I spend on a single dinner. Because I'm not a professional nanny. I'm just someone who understands sad babies. Mark looked at Helena, then at his children. He had nothing left to lose. You can start early tomorrow, but I'll be clear. Don't expect miracles. Just try to find out why they cry so much. Helena nodded. I'll find out, sir, I promise. When she left, Mark was alone with the babies, who continued to cry. For the first time, he wondered if the problem wasn't with them, but with him. That night would be the last one he would completely ignore his children's cries, because tomorrow Helena would arrive, and with her, truths he wasn't prepared to face. Helena arrived the next morning at 7 sharp as agreed. Carmen greeted her at the back door with a look of pity on her face, as if she were watching someone walk straight into a cliff. Girl, are you sure you want to work here? The housekeeper whispered, looking nervously up the stairs. You still have time to quit. Why would I quit? Helena asked, tying on her apron. Because they've been crying since 5 this morning. Mr. Sterling hasn't even come down for coffee. He's locked in his office with the door slammed shut. As if on cue, the twins' screams echoed through the entire house. A desperate sound that made anyone want to run away. Helena listened carefully, as if she were deciphering a complex piece of music. Are they hungry? She asked. They already had a bottle at 6. They've also been changed. They had a bath, everything is in order, but they won't stop crying. Helena climbed the stairs slowly, following the sound of the crying. The second-floor hallway was elegant, with expensive paintings on the walls and a thick carpet that muffled footsteps. But there was something strange she noticed immediately. All the doors were closed, except for the baby's room. Carmen, she called when the housekeeper came up behind her. Which is Mr. Sterling's room? The last one down the hall. After his office. Helena looked in the indicated direction. Between the baby's room and their father's room, there was at least 60 feet of distance. And he's always slept there? Always, since the boys were born. And before, when his wife was alive? Carmen looked uncomfortable. Before, they slept in the master bedroom, which is on the other side of the house, but after Mrs. Isabella passed away, he moved to the farthest room. Helena stopped at the door of the twins' room. Peter and Paul were in their cribs, crying with an intensity that seemed impossible for such small babies. But she didn't enter immediately. Instead, she stood observing the hallway. "Carmen, show me the whole house. I want to see every room." "What for? You're only going to work in the kitchen and service areas." "I want to understand how this family lived before the babies were born." The housekeeper hesitated, but finally agreed. They went down to the ground floor, and Carmen began the tour. The house was immense. A living room, dining room, library, office, gourmet kitchen, recreation area, all impeccably decorated but with a cold air, as if no one really lived there. "Where did you have your meals when Mrs. Isabella was alive?" Helena asked. "In the dining room, always. She made a point of making them family moments. And now?" "Mr. Sterling eats in his office, when he eats. Sometimes he just drinks coffee all day." Helena went to the dining room. The mahogany table for 12 was immaculate, as if it had never been used, but on top of the sideboard there were circular marks on the wood, as if someone had removed objects that had always been there. "What used to be on here?" she asked, running her finger over the marks. Carmen lowered her eyes. "Family photos. Mr. Sterling had everything put away after the boys were born." "Put away where?" "In Mrs. Isabella's room. He locked the door, and no one can enter." Helena felt a pang in her chest. "He forbade anything of his wife's from being visible?" "Not just forbade it. He collected everything himself. Photos, clothes, perfumes, even the plants she took care of. He said he didn't want painful reminders around the house." "And when did this happen?" "Right after he brought the babies home from the hospital. In the first week." Helena went back up to the second floor, this time paying attention to details she had missed before. The hallway walls had lighter rectangular marks, as if paintings had been removed. At the end of the hallway, there was a door with a different lock from the others. "Is that Mrs. Isabella's room?" she asked. "It was the couple's master bedroom. Now it's been locked for 8 months." Helena approached the door and put her ear to it. From the other side came a sepulchral silence, as if the room were dead. But what caught her attention most was its location. The room was exactly next to the baby's room. "Carmen, can I ask you a very personal question?" The housekeeper became tense. "Depends on the question. How did Mrs. Isabella die?" "During childbirth. Complications with the cesarean. She lost a lot of blood, and they couldn't save her." "And was Mr. Sterling present?" "He was in the operating room when she passed. He came out of there completely destroyed." Helena returned to the baby's room, where Peter and Paul were still crying. This time she entered and approached the cribs. The babies were clearly exhausted, but they couldn't stop crying. "You feel it, don't you?" she whispered, looking at them. "You know that someone very important should be here, but isn't." As if they understood her words, the babies cried even louder. Helena noticed something none of the previous nannies had. They weren't crying while looking in any direction. They were always looking at the wall that separated their room from the master bedroom. "Carmen," she called, "come here for a minute." The housekeeper reluctantly entered the room. "What is it?" "Notice where they're looking when they cry." Carmen watched for a few seconds. Peter's face was turned to the wall on the right. Paul was doing the same. It was as if they were calling for someone on the other side. "My God," Carmen murmured, "they're looking at their mother's room." "Exactly. And I bet they've been doing that since they were born." "But that's impossible. Babies don't know where people are." "They don't know where Helena corrected, "but they know where they should be." At that moment, the bedroom door opened abruptly. Mark entered like a hurricane, his hair disheveled and a furious expression on his face. "What are you doing in here? Why aren't you doing what you were hired to do?" "Mr. Sterling," Helena said calmly, "I'm trying to understand why your children cry so much. I told you yesterday there's no explanation, they just cry." There is an explanation, and you know what it is." Mark stopped, yelling, "What are you talking about? Your children are crying for their mother, and they know you blame them for her death." The silence that followed was deafening. Even the babies stopped crying for a few seconds, as if they felt the tension in the air. Mark went pale, his hands trembling with rage. "You don't know what you're talking about," he said in a dangerously low voice. "I do. You removed all reminders of your wife. You changed rooms to be as far away from your children as possible. And you avoid touching them because they remind you of your loss." "Shut up!" Mark exploded. "You have no right to talk about my family." "Aren't your children your family?" Helena asked without flinching. The question hit Mark like a bullet. He looked at the babies, who had resumed crying, then at Helena, who was staring at him without fear. "They killed my wife," he said, his voice broken. "Isabella was perfectly fine until she decided to have children. If she hadn't gotten pregnant, she would still be alive." Carmen put a hand over her mouth, shocked. In 8 months, she had never heard Mark talk so openly about the guilt he carried. "Mr. Sterling," Helena said softly, "can I tell you something about myself? I don't want to hear it. When my brother was born, my mother had complications during childbirth. She died 3 days later." Mark stopped pacing and looked at her. "I was 18, and I spent those 3 days hating that baby. I thought he had killed my mother. When she really passed, I blamed my brother for everything. So what? So I spent 2 months mistreating an innocent child until my father died in a car accident. That's when I realized my brother hadn't killed anyone. He was just the result of my parents' love." Mark sat in the room's armchair as if he couldn't stand anymore. "But Isabella died because of them." "Isabella died to give them life," Helena corrected. "And I bet if she could choose again, she would make the same choice." "You didn't know her?" "No, but I know mothers. And mothers don't blame their children for their own death. They ask their partners to love the children for them." The babies continued to cry, but now it seemed like a different kind of crying. It wasn't pure desperation, it was a plea, a call for someone they desperately needed. "Their father," Helena said. "Mr. Sterling, when was the last time you held your children?" I don't remember." "You don't remember, or you've never held them?" Mark closed his eyes. "I could never do it. Whenever I look at them, I see Isabella dying on the operating table, and they feel that, which is why they cry so much. They know they should be loved, but they only find rejection." Carmen, who had been silent until then, finally spoke. "Mr. Sterling, Mrs. Isabella always said she wanted her children to grow up, surrounded by love." "She said that?" Mark asked with a choked voice. "She did. In the last months of her pregnancy, she only talked about how she would raise the boys with great affection." Helena approached Mark slowly. "Do you want to try? Just for a few minutes?" "Try what?" "Holding one of your children." Mark looked at the cribs as if they were bombs about to explode. "I can't." "Yes, you can, and they need this." Helena went to Peter's crib and carefully picked him up. The baby continued to cry, but calmed down a little at the human touch. She walked to Mark and held the child out to him. "Just for a minute," she insisted. With trembling hands, Mark took his son into his arms. Peter was smaller than he imagined, more fragile, more real, and the moment he felt his father's warmth, he stopped crying completely. The silence in the room was magical. For the first time in 8 months, one of the twins had stopped crying in his father's arms. Paul, seeing his brother so calm, also lessened his crying. "My God," Mark whispered, looking at his son, "he stopped." "Because that's what he's always wanted," Helena said, "his father's love." Mark looked at Peter, who was now observing him with curious little eyes, as if he were meeting his father for the first time. And maybe he was. "I'm a terrible father," he murmured. "You're not. You're just a father who's afraid to love and lose again." "What if I can't? What if I only bring them more pain?" Helena smiled for the first time since she had arrived. Then I'll teach you. After all, that's what I'm here for. Outside it began to rain, as if the sky was washing away years of accumulated pain. And for the first time in 8 months, the Sterling house knew a few minutes of peace. But Helena knew that was only the beginning. The most painful truths were yet to come. The magical moment lasted only 5 minutes. Peter had stopped crying in his father's arms. Paul watched curiously from his crib, and for the first time in 8 months, the house knew silence. But when Mark tried to return the baby to Helena, his hands began to tremble violently. "I can't," he said, quickly holding Peter out. "I can't look at him without seeing Isabella dying." Helena took the baby, who immediately began to cry again, as if he knew he had lost his chance for connection with his father. "Mr. Sterling, what exactly happened on the day they were born?" "I already told you Isabella died in childbirth." "No, I want to know what really happened. The details." Mark stood up abruptly from the armchair. "Why do you want to know this?" "It won't change anything." "Yes, it will, because as long as you don't face the truth, your children will keep crying. They feel your pain, Mr. Sterling. They feel your guilt." Carmen, who had been silently watching the scene, stepped forward. "Sir, maybe it's time to talk about that day." "Carmen, no. For 8 months you've carried this weight alone. It's not working." Mark walked to the window, turning his back on everyone. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained grey. "You don't understand. I killed my wife." "How?" Helena asked softly. "I convinced her to have children. Isabella was always afraid of pregnancy. She said she had bad premonitions, but I insisted. I told her she was being silly, that women have children every day without a problem." The babies cried more softly now, as if they were listening to their father's confession. "Keep going," Helena encouraged. During the pregnancy, she had several complications: high blood pressure, bleeding. The doctor suggested absolute bed rest, but I was focused on business. I thought she was exaggerating. Carmen lowered her eyes. She remembered everything perfectly. On the day of the delivery, Isabella was terrified. She held my hand and said she was sure something was going to go wrong. I laughed. I told her she was being dramatic. Mark turned to look at his children, his eyes filled with tears. The last words she heard from me were, "Stop being dramatic, Isabella. Everything will be fine." The silence in the room was heavy. Helena continued to rock Peter, who had calmed down a bit. And then she went into surgery. I stayed in the waiting room, nervous, but still thinking her worries were silly. When the doctors came out with the babies, I thought it was over. But they came back in a hurry. Mark's voice began to fail. Hemorrhage. They couldn't stop the bleeding. An hour passed, 2 hours, doctors going in and out of the operating room. And I was there, praying to God for more time. What happened next? Then a doctor came to tell me they had managed to stop the bleeding, but Isabella had fallen into a coma. He said the next few hours would be decisive. Helena approached him. And the babies? The babies were in the neonatal ICU, perfect, healthy, crying loudly, and I hated them. Mark swallowed hard. I would look at them and think, because of you, my wife might die. "Mr. Sterling, let me finish," he exploded. Isabella was in a coma for 3 days. 3 days that I spent at the hospital without eating, without sleeping, just praying. And you know what I was doing? I was bargaining with God. What do you mean? I was saying, God, if you save my wife, I'll do anything. I'll give all my assets to charity. I'll dedicate my life to the poor. Anything, just don't take her from me. Carmen was crying silently. She had never heard this version of the story. On the 3rd day, Isabella woke up. For a few hours I thought God had answered my prayers. She was weak, but conscious. She talked to me, asked about the babies. "And what did you say?" I said they were fine. I promised we would raise them together, that she would make a full recovery. Lies I wanted to be true. Helena realized they were getting to the most painful part of the story. That night, Isabella got worse again. A generalized infection. Her body no longer had the strength to fight. When the doctors called me for the last time, I knew. Mark sat down in the armchair again, as if he couldn't stand anymore. She asked me to promise one thing before she passed. What? That I would love our children for both of us, that I wouldn't blame them for her death. Helena felt a lump in her throat. And what did you say? I promised. I held her hand and promised I would be the best father in the world. And then she smiled, closed her eyes and... Mark couldn't finish the sentence. He collapsed into sobs for the first time in 8 months. Deep sobs that came from the depths of his soul. Helena placed Peter back in his crib and approached Mark. Sir, it wasn't your fault. Yes, it was. If I hadn't insisted on having children, she would be alive. Or she wouldn't. No one knows the future. Isabella chose to have children too, Mr. Sterling. It was her decision. But I convinced her. Convincing isn't forcing. She could have said no. Carmen also approached. Mr. Sterling, can I tell you something I've never told anyone? He looked at her through his tears. Mrs. Isabella came to talk to me 2 weeks before the boys were born. She said she was afraid of dying in childbirth, but that she didn't regret being pregnant. She said that? She did. She said that if something happened to her, I should remind you that the choice was also hers, that she very much wanted to be a mother. Mark was silent, processing the information. There's more, Carmen continued. She asked me to hide some things for the boys. Letters, photos, memories. She said that when they grew up, I should give them everything. What? Letters? Letters she wrote to Peter and Paul, one for each year of their lives, until they turn 18. 36 letters in total. Helena felt the hairs on her arms stand up. Where are these letters? Hidden in her room. Mrs. Isabella gave me an extra key and made me promise that I would only open the room when you were ready. Mark looked at Carmen in disbelief. You had access to the room all this time. I did, but I respected your grief. I knew it wasn't the right time. And now Helena stepped forward. Now your children need to know their mother, and you need to truly say goodbye. Mark looked at the babies, who had calmed down a bit during the conversation. It was as if they knew something important was happening. I don't know if I can go into that room, he admitted. You don't have to go in alone, Helena said. We'll go with you. And if it's too painful, it will be. But the pain you're feeling now, by running away from the memories, is worse. Carmen took a set of keys from a drawer. Sir, this room has been closed for 8 months. Maybe it's time to let the air in. Mark stood up slowly, like a man walking toward his own judgment. Fine, but if I can't stay in there, we leave. It's a deal, Helena said. They left the baby's room, leaving the door open so they could hear them if they started crying again. They walked down the hall to the master bedroom door, which had been closed for so many months. Carmen put the key in the lock, but before turning it, she looked at Mark. Sir, are you sure? He took a deep breath. I am. The door opened with a creak. The room was dark, with the curtains closed and a stale smell. Carmen turned on the light and they all stood at the entrance. The room was exactly as Isabella had left it. The bed was made, the perfumes were on the dresser, clothes were in the half-open closet. It was as if she had just gone out to the hospital and would be back at any moment. Mark took a step forward and stopped. I can smell her perfume. Mrs. Isabella always wore that rose perfume, Carmen said softly. Helena looked around the room. There were photos everywhere. Mark and Isabella traveling, celebrating birthdays, their wedding day. And on the nightstand, a photo of her pregnant, smiling and holding her belly. She looked happy when she was pregnant, Helena observed. She was, Mark admitted. Even with her fears, she was radiant. She said she could feel the babies moving and talk to them every night. Carmen went to the closet and opened a drawer at the back. The letters are here. She took out a decorated wooden box full of numbered envelopes. On the first envelope was written, "To Peter and Paul, first year of life." Mark took the envelope with trembling hands. "Can I open it?" "You can." She left instructions for them to be opened when necessary. He carefully opened it and took out a handwritten letter in Isabella's delicate handwriting. "Read it aloud," Helena asked. Mark began to read. His voice choked. "My loves, Peter and Paul, if you are hearing this letter, it means I couldn't stay to take care of you personally. But know that every second of the pregnancy was the happiest time of my life." He stopped, tears making it difficult to continue. "Keep going," Helena encouraged. "Your father may be sad and angry now. He may even blame you for my passing, but don't blame him. He loved me so much that he must be lost without me. Be patient with your daddy." Mark broke down, crying again. "I want you to know that I chose you. Even knowing the risks, I chose to give you life, and I would make the same choice 1,000,000 times over. You are the greatest gift I could give to the world." Helena felt tears streaming down her own face. "Take care of each other, be friends forever, and take care of your daddy too. He's going to need your love very much. One day when you grow up, tell him that I don't blame anyone for my death. It was the price I paid for your lives, and it was a fair price." Mark couldn't speak anymore. Carmen finished reading. "Live happily, my loves. Be kind, be brave, be loved, and know that wherever I am, I will always be watching over you. With all my love, Mommy Isabella." The silence in the room was total. 3 adults were crying, processing words written by a woman who knew she was going to die, but who chose to leave love instead of bitterness. "She doesn't blame me," Mark whispered. "She never did," Carmen confirmed. "She told me that the only thing that made her sad was thinking you might blame yourself forever." Helena approached Mark. "Your children didn't kill your wife, Mr. Sterling. They are the last gift she gave you." Mark looked around the room, seeing for the first time not a mausoleum of pain, but a place full of love and happy memories. "I want to try," he said finally. "Try what?" "To be the father Isabella hoped I would be." Helena smiled through her tears. "Then let's start now." They left the room, leaving the door open for the first time in 8 months. When they reached the baby's room, they found Peter and Paul sleeping peacefully. For the first time in 8 months, they weren't crying. 3 in the morning. For the first time in 8 months, Mark wasn't woken up by the twins' screams. The silence in the house was so profound that he woke up on his own, confused, thinking something terrible had happened. He got up quickly and ran to the baby's room, his heart pounding. Peter and Paul were sleeping peacefully in their cribs, breathing softly, with the serene expressions he had never seen on his children's faces. For the first time, they seemed like normal babies, not children tormented by something they couldn't express. Helena was sitting in an armchair next to the cribs, also sleeping. She had spent the whole night there, watching to make sure the babies were truly at peace. Mark stood at the door, observing the scene he never imagined possible. "Mr. Sterling," Helena whispered, waking up from the noise he made at the door. "Are they okay?" he asked softly, afraid of breaking the spell. "They're fine." They slept all night without a single whimper. Mark approached the crib slowly, as if he were seeing his children for the first time. Peter had a calm expression on his face, a little fist closed near his mouth. Paul was sleeping on his stomach, his pink face resting on the pillow. "They look different," he murmured. "They aren't different, Mr. Sterling. It's you." "What do you mean?" Helena got up from the armchair, being careful not to make a sound. "Yesterday, when you read Isabella's letter, something changed inside you, and they felt it. Babies don't feel those things, do they? They do, especially when it comes to their own parents. They lived for 8 months feeling your guilt, your anger, your rejection. Yesterday they felt love for the first time." Mark was silent, observing his children. It was true that something had changed in him. After reading Isabella's letter, the overwhelming guilt he had carried for 8 months had lessened, replaced by a painful but necessary understanding. "Helena," he said softly, "can I ask you something?" "Of course. Why do you care so much? You don't even know me, and you didn't know my family. Why are you doing this?" Helena smiled sadly. "Because I know what it's like to grow up without a father's love. Your father didn't love you. My father loved me, but he was lost in his own grief. After my mother died, he spent 2 years blaming me for what happened." Mark felt a pang in his chest. "And what happened?" "He died in an accident before he could forgive me, before he could truly love me again. I'm so sorry. I don't want your children to go through what I did. I don't want them to grow up thinking they're to blame for their mother's death." Peter stirred in his crib, making a soft sound, but continued to sleep. Mark had a strange impulse to approach and touch his son's face, but he still hesitated. "You can touch him," Helena encouraged. "He won't wake up." With extreme care, Mark reached out and touched Peter's cheek. The skin was soft and warm, completely real. For 8 months he had looked at his children as if they were ghosts of his dead wife, but now he saw that they were just babies who needed their father. "He's so small," he murmured, "and defenseless. He needs you very much. I don't know how to be a father, Helena. I never learned. Born knowing. No one is. You learn by doing." Mark slowly withdrew his hand and moved away from the crib. "What if I do everything wrong? What if I hurt them without meaning to? Then we'll fix it. But doing it wrong while trying is better than doing nothing at all." At that moment, Paul woke up, not crying, just opening his eyes and looking around. When he saw Mark, he didn't start screaming, as he always did. He just watched, curious. "He's looking at me," Mark said, surprised. "He is. He wants to know. His father. And now? What do I do? Talk to him. Babies like to hear their parents' voices." Mark approached Paul's crib, nervous. "Hi, son." The word son came out strangely from his mouth, as if it were a language he didn't master. But Paul smiled, a small but unmistakable smile. "He smiled," Mark exclaimed softly. "He smiled because he recognized his father's voice." Peter also woke up with the sound of the voices, but like his brother, he didn't cry. He just watched the scene with childish interest. "They really are beautiful," Mark admitted, looking at his 2 calm, awake children. "They look like Isabella when they smile," Helena said. "They do. They have her eyes, the shape of her face, and your personality, probably." Mark laughed softly. "I hope not. I'm very stubborn. Stubborn can be a good thing. It means you don't give up easily." Paul began to make soft noises, not of crying, but as if he were trying to talk. Mark looked at Helena, not knowing what to do. "He wants attention," she explained. "He wants his father to talk to him." "Talk about what? He doesn't understand anything." "It doesn't matter. Babies like the sound of a voice, of affection. Tell him something about his mother." Mark hesitated, but then he got closer to the crib. "Paul, did you know that your mother was the most beautiful woman in the world?" Paul stopped making noises and paid attention, as if he understood every word. "She was so happy when she found out you were coming. She bought clothes, chose names, and prepared this room with so much love." Peter also seemed to be listening, both babies fixed on their father. "She used to sing to you when you were still in her belly. Always the same song, a lullaby that her grandmother sang." "Do you remember the song?" Helena asked. "I do." Mark began to sing softly, a gentle melody he had heard Isabella sing hundreds of times during her pregnancy. The effect was magical. The 2 babies relaxed completely, as if the song awakened some deep memory of the time they were safe in their mother's womb. "They know that song," Helena said, moved. "Isabella sang it every day. She said she wanted them to be born already knowing they were loved. And they do. That's why they stopped crying when you finally started showing them love." Mark continued singing for a few minutes until the babies fell asleep again. Then he just stood there, watching them, feeling something new growing in his chest. It was no longer pain or guilt. It was protection, care, responsibility. "Helena," he said, "can I tell you a secret?" "Of course." "I always wanted to be a father. Since I was a little boy, I dreamed of having children, teaching them things, watching them grow up. But when Isabella died, it was as if that dream had turned into a nightmare. And now I'm afraid to try and not be the father they deserve." Helena approached him. "Mr. Sterling, can I tell you something I learned from taking care of my brother? There's no such thing as a perfect father. There are fathers who try, who care, who are present. Isabella didn't expect you to be perfect. She expected you to try. And if I try and fail, then you try again and again until you get it right." Peter stirred in his crib and opened his eyes again. This time, when he saw Mark, he stretched his little arms up, as if asking to be held. "He wants me to hold him?" Mark asked incredulously. "He does. He's asking for his father's affection." With a pounding heart, Mark took Peter into his arms. The baby snuggled against his chest, sighing contentedly. It was the first time in 8 months that one of his children felt truly safe in his father's arms. "It's an incredible feeling," Mark murmured. "It's what Isabella wanted you to feel from day one." Paul, seeing his brother in his father's lap, also began to stretch his little arms out. Mark looked at Helena, torn. "Can I hold both of them?" "Of course. They're your children." With care, Helena helped Mark to settle Paul in his other arm. There he was, for the first time in his life, holding both of his children at the same time. Peter and Paul calmed down completely, as if they were finally where they had always been meant to be. "They're so small," Mark said, moved, "and they're completely dependent on me." "They are, but you're capable of taking care of them." "How can you be so sure?" "Because I saw the love in your eyes when you read Isabella's letter. That love was always there, Mr. Sterling. It was just hidden under the grief." Mark was silent, gently rocking his children. It was incredible how complete he felt with them in his arms, as if a part of him that had been broken for 8 months was finally healing. "Helena," he said after a few minutes, "you saved my family." "I didn't save them. I just showed you what was already there. Even so, I owe you more than I can ever repay." "You don't owe me anything, sir. Seeing these babies happy is payment enough." Mark looked at her with curiosity. "Why are you so different from the other people who worked here?" "Different how?" "All the nannies came here just for the money. They did the job mechanically, without really caring about Peter and Paul. You genuinely care." Helena smiled. "Because I've been in their place. I know what it's like to be a child and feel like you're not loved." "And your brother, how is he now?" "He grew up well, despite everything. He's married, has children, he's a good man, but he carries scars from his childhood that will never completely heal." "What kind of scars?" "Insecurity, a fear of not being good enough, a difficulty in trusting people's love. Things that could have been avoided if my father had overcome his grief more quickly." Mark looked at his children in his arms. "I don't want Peter and Paul to have those scars. They won't, because you'll be present. You'll show them love. You'll be the father they need, with your help, whenever you need it. But you'll find that being a father is more instinctive than it seems." At that moment, Peter began to fuss softly. It wasn't the desperate crying of the last 8 months, but a normal baby cry. "What does he want?" Mark asked, slightly panicked. Helena laughed. "He's probably hungry. What time did they have their last bottle?" "I don't know. Carmen handles that." "Then we'll learn. Being a father includes knowing when your children are hungry." They went down to the kitchen. Mark was still carrying both babies. It was 4 in the morning, and the house was silent. But for the first time in months, it was a peaceful, not tense, silence. Helena prepared the bottles while Mark stayed in the living room, watching his children. Peter continued to whimper softly, but Paul remained calm, as if he were enjoying being held by his father. "Here you go," Helena said, returning with the warm bottle. "Can I give them?" Mark asked. "Of course. I'll show you how." Helena showed him how to position the babies, how to hold the bottles, and how to know if they were satisfied. Mark followed the instructions carefully, concentrating as if he were learning the most complex operation in the world. Peter sucked the bottle avidly, clearly hungry. Paul drank more slowly, stopping once in a while to look at his father, as if he still couldn't believe he was really there. "They've been bottle-fed since they were born?" Mark asked. "Yes. Since Isabella couldn't breastfeed, Carmen and the nannies always bottle-fed them. Isabella wanted to breastfeed. She really did. She talked about it throughout the pregnancy. She said it was the most intimate way to show her love for her children." Mark felt a pang of sadness. But this time, it wasn't the paralyzing pain from before. It was a gentle longing, mixed with gratitude for the good memories. "She would have been an incredible mother," he said. "She will be, through the letters, memories, the stories you'll tell them about her." When the babies finished their bottles, Mark put them on his shoulder to burp them, following Helena's instructions. It was incredible how movements that seemed so natural for other people were completely new to him. "Am I doing it right?" he asked, insecure. "Perfectly. See how natural it is." Peter burped loudly, making Mark laugh. "Just like his dad," he joked. "And Paul is more delicate, like his mom," Helena observed. After they burped, the babies became sleepy again. Mark gently rocked them, humming the song Isabella used to sing. In a few minutes, both were sound asleep. "I'll put them in their cribs," he said. "Do you want me to help?" "No, I want to try on my own." He went up the stairs carefully, carrying both of his children. In the room, he placed Peter down first, then Paul, covering them with light blankets. They continued to sleep with serene expressions. Helena stood at the door, watching. It was the first time she had seen Mark act like a true father, and the transformation was impressive. "Mr. Sterling," she said softly, "can I make a suggestion?" "Of course." "How about you sleep in the room next door tonight to be close to them?" Mark looked at the guest room that was between the baby's room and the master bedroom. "You think that's a good idea?" "I do. If they wake up, you can take care of them yourself. And if you don't know what to do, just call me or Carmen. But I bet you'll know instinctively." Mark nodded. "Okay, I'll try." As Helena was leaving the room, he called her. "Helena?" "Yes?" "Thank you for everything." "You're welcome, Mr. Sterling. Sleep well." Helena went down to the room Carmen had prepared for her on the ground floor. For the first time since she had arrived at the house, she felt she had fulfilled her mission. The babies were at peace, Mark was learning to be a father, and the family was beginning to heal. But she knew there was still a long way to go. The transformation had begun, but it would take a lot of work to make it permanent. From upstairs, no sound came. For the first time in 8 months, the Sterling house slept in complete silence. A week had passed since the night everything changed. Mark woke up every day at 6 in the morning, no longer from the desperate crying of his children, but by his own volition. He had discovered that he liked to watch Peter and Paul sleeping, to see the serene expressions he had never noticed before. That Friday morning, he found Helena in the kitchen, preparing the bottles, as she did every morning since she had arrived. "Good morning, Helena," he said, picking Peter up. The baby had woken up first and was looking at him with curiosity. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling. Did you sleep well?" "Better than I have in the last 8 months," he replied sincerely. "And you?" It's incredible how different the house feels when there's peace. Carmen entered the kitchen at that moment with a look of astonishment on her face. "Mr. Sterling, do you know what time it is?" 6:15 in the morning. "Exactly. And you're awake by choice, smiling with your son in your arms." Mark laughed. "It is strange, isn't it? Last week I hated waking up. Now I wake up eager to see Peter and Paul." Mrs. Isabella would be very happy, Carmen said emotionally. She always said you would be a wonderful father once you overcame your fear. She talked about that. She did, during the pregnancy. She said you had so much love stored up that when you let it out it would be overwhelming. Helena watched the conversation as she finished preparing the second bottle. It was incredible to see how Mark had changed in just 1 week. The bitter, guilty man had been replaced by someone who genuinely wanted to learn to be a father. "Helena," Mark said, "can I ask you a favor?" "Of course." "I want to take Peter and Paul to see the company office today. Can you come with me?" Helena was surprised. "Are you sure? It's a very different environment for small babies." "I'm sure. I want my employees to meet my children. For 8 months, I acted as if they didn't exist. Now I want to show everyone that I'm a father." Carmen smiled proudly. "Mrs. Isabella always wanted you to take the boys to work from time to time. She talked about it. She said she wanted her children to grow up seeing how their father worked, so they could be proud of him." Mark felt that familiar pang of longing. But now it was different. It was no longer a paralyzing pain, but a sweet longing, mixed with a desire to honor Isabella's memory. "So let's go," he said to Helena. "What time are the babies usually calmest?" "In the morning, right after their bottle. But Mr. Sterling, are you sure it's not too early? They're still so small." "Helena, for 8 months I treated them as if they were a problem. Now I want to treat them as what they are, my children." 2 hours later they were in the car on their way to the company. Mark was driving nervously, constantly checking the rearview mirror to make sure the babies were okay in the car seats he had bought specifically for the occasion. "Are they okay?" he asked for the 5th time in 10 minutes. "They're great," Helena replied patiently. "Peter is sleeping, and Paul is looking at the scenery." "Can they get car sick?" "They can, but it's unlikely. They're used to it since they were little." "How do you know that?" Helena hesitated before answering. "Because Carmen has taken them to the pediatrician several times. They always travel." "Well," Mark stopped at a red light and turned to look at his children. "I should have gone with you to those medical appointments." "You should have. But don't blame yourself. The important thing is that you're present now." "Helena, can I ask you a personal question?" "You can." "Why did you never have children of your own? You're incredible with babies." Helena was silent for a few seconds. It was a question that touched on wounds that were still open in her life. "I had an engagement that ended badly a few years ago," she said finally. "My ex-fiancé didn't want me to take care of my brother. He said I had to choose between him and my family." "And you chose your family?" "I did. My brother needed me more than any boy." "He didn't understand." "He didn't. He said I would never be a good wife because I already had too many responsibilities." Mark felt anger for a man he had never met. He was wrong. Any man should feel lucky to have a woman like you. Helena smiled sadly. "Thank you, but after that I decided that maybe having my own family wasn't for me." "And do you regret it sometimes?" "I do. But then I see cases like yours, families I can help, and I think that maybe that's my purpose." "What purpose?" "Caring for broken families, helping parents and children reconnect." They arrived at the company building, and Mark parked in his reserved spot. It was an elegant 20-story building with the name Sterling Imports in gold letters on the facade. "Impressive," Helena said. "Isabella always said she wanted to bring the boys here to see where their dad worked," Mark commented, picking Peter up while Helena picked up Paul. They entered the lobby of the building, causing an immediate commotion. Employees who had known Mark for years were stunned to see him carrying a baby, accompanied by a young woman with another baby. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," the doorman said, clearly curious but trying to maintain his composure. "Good morning, Robert. These are my sons, Peter and Paul." Robert's eyes widened. For 8 months he had seen Mark come to work with a long face, irritated, tired. Now he was smiling, proud, introducing his children. "They're beautiful, sir. They look a lot like you." "Thank you. Helena, let's go up in the elevator." Mark was visibly nervous. "What if the employees think it's weird that I brought the baby? They'll think it's wonderful. Everyone loves babies. And what if Peter and Paul start crying? If they do, we'll go back down, but they're calm." The elevator stopped on the 15th floor, where the management was located. When the doors opened, Sandra, Mark's secretary of 10 years, almost fell off her chair. "Mr. Sterling, what a surprise." "And these are my sons," he said with obvious pride in his voice. "Peter and Paul." Sandra approached, her eyes shining. "Can I see them up close?" "Of course." Sandra looked at the babies carefully. "My God, they're identical. And what beautiful eyes." "They're their mother's eyes," Mark said softly. "They are. I remember Mrs. Isabella. What a special woman." Other employees began to approach, drawn by the commotion. In a few minutes, there was a small crowd around Mark and Helena, all wanting to meet the baby. "Mr. Sterling," said Carla from accounting. "Excuse my curiosity, but is this the new nanny?" "This is Helena," Mark replied. "She's helped us a lot in the last few weeks." Helena noticed that he hadn't explained exactly what her job was and was grateful for it. It would have been embarrassing to say she was a housekeeper in front of all those executives. Peter began to get restless with so many people around, making soft noises that Mark had already learned to recognize. "He's getting uncomfortable," he said to Helena. "Let's go to my office. Fewer people, a calmer environment." They entered Mark's office. It was an elegant space with a view of the city. Helena placed Paul on the leather sofa while Mark rocked. "Peter, what an incredible view," she commented. "Isabella loved this view. Whenever she came here, she would spend hours looking at the city. She came often." "She did, especially in the last few years. She said she wanted to get to know my work so she could talk to me about business." Mark approached the window, still rocking Peter. "She would sit on the sofa where Paul is now and watch me work. She said it was relaxing to see how I concentrate." "You were very close." "We were. Maybe. That's why it was so hard to accept the loss." Helena approached him. "Mr. Sterling, can I tell you something I learned about grief? The pain of loss never completely goes away, but over time it transforms. It stops being a pain that paralyzes and becomes a longing that drives you forward." "What do you mean?" "You can use the love you felt for Isabella to love Peter and Paul. You can raise them the way she would have wanted and teach them the values she had." Mark looked at the son in his arms. "You think I can do it?" "I'm sure. I've seen how you've changed in 1 week. If you can do that, you can do anything." Peter had calmed down completely and was now watching his father with attention. Paul on the sofa was also quiet, as if he sensed that he was in an important place for the family. "Helena," Mark said, "I want to show you something." He went to the desk and opened a drawer, taking out a picture frame that was face down. It was a photo of Isabella pregnant, smiling and holding her belly. "This photo was always on my desk. The day the boys were born, I turned it face down and I could never look at it again." "And now?" Mark put the photo back upright on the desk in its usual position. "Now I want her to see how our children are growing up." Helena felt her eyes well up with tears. "Isabella would be so proud of the father you're becoming." "You think so?" "I'm sure." At that moment, Sandra knocked on the door. "Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's a situation that needs your attention." "What kind of situation?" "The Chinese supplier is having documentation problems. It could delay the delivery by 2 weeks." Mark looked at Peter in his arms, then at Paul on the sofa. Months ago, this situation would have made him desperate, made him work late to solve it. Now, his priorities were completely different. "Sandra, schedule a video conference for Monday. Today, I want to be with my children." Sandra was surprised. The Mark from 8 months ago would never postpone an urgent problem to spend time on anything other than work. Are you sure, sir? It's a $2 million contract. I'm sure. Money can be recovered. Lost time with children never can. After Sandra left, Helena looked at Mark with admiration. You've really changed. Isabella always told me I worked too much, that I would miss important moments in life because of business. And now you understand what she meant. I do. These two boys are going to grow up so fast. I can't miss a single day with them. Paul began to fuss softly on the sofa. Mark immediately picked him up, leaving Helena to hold Peter. What does he want? He asked, already more confident than a week ago. He probably needs his diaper changed, and then it'll be time for a bottle. Is there a bathroom here with a changing station? Helena looked around the executive office. It doesn't look like it. Then we'll improvise. Mark cleared the meeting table and spread a towel from the closet. Over it? Does this work? It works perfectly. Helena watched Mark change Paul's diaper carefully, still a bit clumsy, but determined to learn. It was incredible to see how a man who, a week ago, wouldn't even touch his children, now made a point of personally taking care of their every need. Done, he said proudly when he finished. He's clean and smells good. Very good now, Peter. Mark changed Peter's diaper as well, gaining confidence with each movement. When he was done, both babies were calm and alert. They seem to like being here, Helena observed. It's as if they know this place is important to their father. At that moment, the door opened and a man in his 50s entered without knocking. It was Rodrigo Maid'S, a minority partner in the company and one of Mark's closest associates. Mark, I need to talk to you about... My God! Rodrigo stopped in mid-sentence when he saw Mark with the two babies in his arms. Rodrigo, these are my sons, Peter and Paul. Rodrigo's jaw dropped. He had known Mark for 15 years and had never seen him show any interest in his children. Mark, what's going on? You disappeared from the company for a week. You're not answering your phone, and now you show up here with the baby. What's going on is that I finally learned how to be a father. What do you mean? Mark looked at Helena, who nodded encouragingly. Rodrigo, do you remember how I was after Isabella died? I remember. You were distraught. I blamed Peter and Paul for her death. For 8 months I avoided any contact with them. Rodrigo sat down heavily in a chair. Mark, I didn't know. No one knew. I hid it from everyone, but Helena helped me understand that I was wrong. Rodrigo looked at Helena with interest. And you are Helena Silva. I work for the family. She saved my children, Rodrigo, and she saved me too. How? Mark took a deep breath and briefly recounted everything that had happened in the last week. The baby's constant crying, the discovery that they felt his rejection, Isabella's letters, the gradual transformation. Incredible, Rodrigo murmured when Mark finished. And now? Now I'm going to be the father Isabella wanted me to be. I'm going to reduce my workload, spend more time at home, and raise my children with love. And the company will continue to grow, but it will no longer be my only priority. Rodrigo smiled for the first time since he had entered. Isabella would be proud of you. I hope. So, Peter began to make hungry noises and Paul quickly joined him. Helena looked at her watch. It's time for a bottle, she said. Is there a place here to heat up milk? Mark asked. There's a small kitchen on the management floor, Rodrigo replied. But Mark, are you going to bottle feed them right here? I am. Why? Well, it's an executive office. Mark looked at his partner with an expression Rodrigo had never seen before. It wasn't irritation or impatience. It was serene determination. Rodrigo, these are my children. They are welcome wherever I am. Of course. I'm sorry, it was just a surprise. Helena returned with the warm bottles, and Mark comfortably settled into the leather armchair to feed the babies. It was an unusual scene, a millionaire CEO bottle-feeding twins in the middle of an executive office. "Can I help you?" Rodrigo offered, seeing Mark trying to balance the two babies. "You can hold Peter while I feed Paul." Rodrigo carefully picked Peter up. "It's been so long since I've held a baby," he murmured. "They're special, aren't they?" Mark said, watching Paul suck on the bottle. "They are, and they seem very calm. They weren't always like that. Helena taught me that babies reflect the emotions of the adults around them. When I was at peace, they became at peace." "Is that true?" Rodrigo asked Helena. "It is. Babies are much more sensitive than we imagine. They feel tension, anger, sadness, but they also feel love, security, and tranquility." "And how did you learn that?" "Personal experience. I raised my younger brother by myself." "Oh, I see." When the babies finished drinking, Mark stood up. "I think it's time for us to go home. They need their afternoon nap." "Mark," Rodrigo said, "can I say something?" "Of course." "In 15 years of partnership, I've never seen you so complete. You seem genuinely happy." Mark looked at his children, who were sleepy in his and Helena's arms. "You know, Rodrigo, I thought I had lost everything when Isabella died, but in reality, she left me the greatest gift she could give. Your sons." "Exactly. And I almost threw that gift away because of my selfish pain." "But you didn't. You still had time to get it back." "I did, thanks to Helena." Helena blushed at the compliment. "Mr. Sterling, the credit is all yours. I just showed you the way. A way I never would have found on my own." They left the company under the curious and admiring glances of the employees. In the car, Mark was driving more relaxed than on the way there, softly humming the lullaby that Isabella used to sing. "Mr. Sterling," Helena said as they were arriving home, "can I ask you something?" "Always." "What do you plan to do in the future regarding the babies, your work, your life?" Mark thought for a few seconds before answering. "I want to raise Peter and Paul the way Isabella dreamed. I want them to grow up knowing they are loved, that their mother wanted them very much, and that their father is present. And your work? Work will adapt. I'll hire more people, delegate more responsibilities. I want to be present for their first steps, their first words, the first time for everything." "And how will you deal with the longing for Isabella?" "I'll honor her memory by being the husband and father she wanted me to be. I'll tell Peter and Paul stories about her, show them photos, and read the letters she left behind." Helena smiled. "She would be very proud." "I hope so." When they arrived home, Carmen was waiting for them at the door with an anxious expression. "How was it? Did the boys behave well?" "They behaved perfectly," Mark replied proudly. "They were the most admired babies in Sao Paulo today." "And you? How did you feel about taking them?" "I felt complete, Carmen. For the first time in 8 months, I felt like a real father." Carmen smiled with tears in her eyes. "Mrs. Isabella is watching everything from up there. I'm sure of it." "I think so too." They entered the house, which no longer seemed like the dark and silent place it had been a week ago. There was life there. There was a future. There was hope. Helena went up with Mark to put the babies to sleep. In the room, he placed them in their cribs carefully, covering them with light blankets. "Sleep well, my loves," he whispered. "Daddy will always be here for you." Peter and Paul closed their eyes almost immediately, as if they knew they were finally safe, loved, and protected. "Miss Sterling," Helena said when they left the room, "can I say I'm proud of you?" "You can, and Helena." "Yes. Thank you for giving me back my children and for giving me back to my... It was a pleasure to see this family reconnect. It was the greatest gift I could receive." They went down to the kitchen together, where Carmen was preparing dinner. The house was at peace, full of life and possibilities. The transformation was complete. Mark had become the father he always had the potential to. Peter and Paul finally had the paternal love they needed, and Helena had fulfilled her mission to heal a broken family. But there was still one last surprise. a discovery that would change everything forever. 6 months after that first night of peace, the Sterling house had been completely transformed. The laughter of Peter and Paul, who were now a year and 2 months old, echoed through the hallways that had once only known silence and tension. Mark had become the present father Isabella had always dreamed of, and Helena continued to be the guardian angel who held the family together. It was a Saturday morning when everything changed forever. Helena was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when she heard Mark talking to the babies in their room. In recent months, he had developed the habit of telling them stories about Isabella every morning, showing them photos of their mother and reading passages from the letters she had left behind. "Peter, Paul, look how beautiful you are in this photo with Mommy," she heard him say. "She was holding you in her belly and saying you were going to be the most loved babies in the world." Helena smiled, preparing the morning bottle. In 6 months, she had never tired of hearing Mark talk so fondly about Isabella. The pain had transformed into a sweet longing, and the guilt had given way to gratitude. "Helena!" Mark's voice shouted from upstairs with an urgency that startled her. She ran up, fearing that something had happened to the babies. She found Mark in the room, holding Peter, his eyes filled with tears of joy. "What happened?" she asked, worried. "Helena, you won't believe it," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "What?" Mark put Peter on the floor, and the baby stood up on his own for a few seconds before taking his first wobbly steps toward Helena. "He walked," Mark shouted. "Peter took his first step." Helena knelt and opened her arms to receive Peter, who reached her, smiling proudly at his achievement. "My God, how wonderful! Congratulations, Peter!" Paul, seeing the commotion, also wanted to try. Mark stood him up, and to everyone's surprise, Paul also took a few shaky steps before falling to his bottom on the rug, laughing loudly. "Both of them on the same day," Helena exclaimed. "What an incredible coincidence!" "Helena," Mark said, picking both of his sons up, "it's not a coincidence. It's today." "What do you mean it's today?" "Today marks exactly 1 year since Isabella died. 1 year since our sons were born." Helena felt a chill. It really was February 15th, the date that had marked both pain and life in the Sterling family. "And they chose today to take their first steps," she murmured. "It's as if Isabella is saying everything is okay, that life goes on, that our children are growing up happy." Carmen appeared at the door of the room, attracted by the shouts of joy. "What's going on here?" "Carmen, Peter and Paul walked," Mark announced proudly. "Both of them on the same day. And it's not just any day, Carmen. It's Isabella's death anniversary." Carmen put a hand to her chest, emotional. "Mrs. Isabella is watching everything. I'm absolutely sure of it." Mark put the babies back on the floor, and they continued to try to walk, each step celebrated as a great victory. Helena watched the scene with her heart full of emotion. "Mr. Sterling," she said, "can I tell you something?" "Always. Today is also a special day for me." "Why?" Helena took a deep breath before answering. "Because today marks exactly 6 months since I arrived here, and in these 6 months I have witnessed the most incredible transformation I have ever seen." "What transformation?" "Yours, Mr. Sterling. 6 months ago you were a broken man, consumed by guilt, unable to love your own children. Today you are the most dedicated father I know." Mark felt his eyes fill with tears. "Helena, without you I never would have gotten here." "Yes, you would have. Maybe it would have taken longer. Maybe it would have been more difficult, but love always finds a way." Peter staggered toward Helena and raised his little arms, asking to be held. She picked him up, and he rested his head on her shoulder, a gesture he had been doing every day for months. "Helena," Mark said softly, "I need to tell you something." "What?" "You're not our employee anymore. You stopped being that a long time ago." "What do you mean?" "Your family, Helena. Peter and Paul love you as if you were family. Carmen treats you like a daughter, and I see you as the sister Isabella would have chosen to take care of our children." Helena felt tears streaming down her face. "Mr. Stop calling me sir. We're family." Carmen approached and hugged Helena. "Girl, from the first day you got here, I knew it wasn't a coincidence. It was divine providence." "How can you be so sure?" Mark smiled. "Because you arrived at the exact moment we needed you. Because you knew exactly what to do. Because you never gave up on us, even when everything seemed impossible." Paul also approached Helena, wanting to be held. She picked up both babies, one in each arm, feeling a sense of completeness she had never experienced. "Helena," Mark said, "I want to make you a proposal." "What kind of proposal?" "I want you to officially be Peter and Paul's godmother, not just on paper, but in life. I want you to help raise them, to be present in every phase of their life." "Mark, I don't know if you deserve that honor." "You deserve it more than anyone in the world. You gave us back our lives, Helena. You taught us how to be a family again." Carmen nodded vigorously. "Mrs. Isabella would be very happy, knowing that someone like you is taking care of the boys." Helena looked at Peter and Paul in her arms. In the last 6 months, she had become attached to the babies in a way she never imagined possible. They had truly become the children of her heart that she had never had. "I accept," she said finally. "It would be an honor to be their godmother." Mark hugged her, still holding the babies. "Thank you, Helena, for everything." At that moment, Peter looked at Mark and said clearly, "Dad." Everyone fell into absolute silence. It was the first clear word either of the babies had spoken. "He said, 'Daddy!'" Carmen shouted. "He did," Mark confirmed, picking Peter up. "Say it again, son." "Daddy, Daddy," Peter repeated, smiling proudly. Paul, not wanting to be left behind, also tried. "Daddy." "They both said it on the same day they learned to walk," Helena exclaimed. "What a special day." Mark looked up, as if he were talking to Isabella. "My love, our children are growing up and they're happy. I hope you're proud." Carmen wiped tears from her eyes. "She is, Mr. Sterling. She's watching everything and smiling." Helena watched the family she had helped to rebuild. 6 months ago, it was a house full of pain, silence, and guilt. Now it was a home full of love, laughter, and hope. "Mark," she said, "can I make a suggestion?" "Of course." "How about we visit Isabella's grave today to tell her about the boys' first steps and first words?" Mark smiled through his tears. "That's a perfect idea. She'll want to know everything." "And we can bring flowers. White roses were her favorite," Carmen suggested. "Let's all go together," Mark decided, "as a family." An hour later, they were at the cemetery. Mark was carrying Peter, Helena was carrying Paul, and Carmen was carrying a bouquet of white roses. It was the first time Mark had visited Isabella's grave since the burial. "Hi, my love," he said, kneeling before the tombstone. "I brought our sons for you to..." He put Peter on the ground, who immediately began to walk toward the grave. Paul did the same, as if he instinctively knew where he was. "They learned to walk today, Isabella, and they said 'Daddy' for the first time. They're growing up beautiful and healthy." Helena approached, and very loved. "Every day I tell them how special their mom is." "Isabella," Mark continued, "I want you to meet Helena. She saved us, taught us how to be a family again. She's going to be Peter and Paul's godmother." The wind rustled the trees around them, as if Isabella were giving her approval. "Thank you, my love," Mark whispered, "for giving me these 2 treasures, for teaching me that love is stronger than pain, for forgiving me." They stood there for a few minutes in silence. A family rebuilt by love, the determination to never give up. When they returned home, Peter and Paul ran, or rather walked wobbly, to their toys, happy and loved babies. Helena prepared lunch while Mark worked on his laptop, but this time with his children playing next to him. "Helena," he said, You saved more than our family. You saved Peter and Paul's future." She smiled. "And you saved mine. You gave me the family I always dreamed of." Outside, the sun was shining brightly, illuminating a house that had known the deepest darkness and found the brightest light. The housekeeper no one wanted had become the most important piece of the family, and the babies, who cried every night, now filled the house with laughter every day. The miracle was complete. Thank you for watching. May this story inspire your day. Like, share, and stay tuned for more.